Hello. My name is Lauren. I am a chartered physiotherapist and I am delighted to be live on the VHI Women's Mini Marathon page. We'll hold on here a little bit and we'll hopefully wait for a couple of people to jump on so we can maximise efficiency. But hopefully we'll be here for the next maybe 20 minutes, half an hour, talking through some of the questions that you guys would have sent in relation to injury reduction in the lead up, I suppose, to the VHI Women's Mini Marathon, ways to prevent injury and possibly kind of ways to treat and manage injuries that you might unfortunately suffer in the training in the lead up to the VHI Women's Mini Marathon. Great to see some people are on. As I said, my name is Lauren Guilfoyle. I am a chartered physiotherapist. I am working in Cork. I work predominantly in a sports population. I work with Cork Con Rugby down here, and I'm also working with Napirshick GAA. And I also tend to try and inform and educate through social media as well. So I'm delighted to be helping you guys out tonight. Cool. Okay, there's loads of people here. Great, we'll get started. So we asked for some questions, and do feel free to pop in the comments below and drop a question if you have one. But I'm just going to grab my notebook here. So the first question that came in was, what are the best 3 warm-up stretches to do before you run? So before we run, the priority, I suppose, I'm sorry, the light is changing outside here now. The priority before you run is actually to warm up the body. So you want to increase your heart rate, which essentially increases the blood flow to your muscles in order to have enough energy within your muscles to produce the action that you want to do. So to summarize that, we should be engaging in a kind of a gentle, gradually more intense set of exercises before we run. So if you want to stretch, I'd recommend doing that at the very, very, very start. But more importantly, we should be doing different movements that warm up the muscles that we will be using when we run. So these are things like our glutes, our quadricep muscles at the front of our legs, our hamstrings at the back of our legs, and our calf muscles down the back of our legs as well. So these are the muscles that are involved in running. So it's important that we warm those up so that the body understands that we want to prepare those sets of muscles for the activity that's to come. So in terms of how to actually do that, engaging in some body weight exercises, no equipment is needed, things like squats, things like walking lunges, bridges if you're at a location where you can get down onto your back. Some people use bands, they are quite handy. Some gentle heel raises, the activity that we're about to engage in. You could break it down and make it even easier beyond that again, and just start with a very gentle walk, because again, you're not reinventing the wheel there, you are warming up the muscles that you will be using later in your run. So yeah, to summarize, we should be stretching at the very, very start, because the issue that we run into, and I see it a lot with different teams, is that we do this really nice dynamic warm up. Our heart rate is nice and high, we've enough blood flow going to those muscles, and then we all stop and we stretch for 5 minutes, and that drops our heart rate again. So other way around, we'll stretch first if you want to. It's not really the be all and end all, but the dynamic body weight movement warm-up is more important. So the second question that we got in was, are there 3 or 4 good strength exercises that I can do to improve my running? Yes is the answer. So again, I've already mentioned them. Some of the more important muscles that we use when it comes to running would be our glutes at the back, our bum muscles, our quads at the front, our hamstrings at the back of our thighs, and our calf muscles down the bottoms of our legs. They're the main muscles that are involved in running, and if we can get them strong and if we can get them to be endurant, it's going to take a little bit more for them to be damaged and to be hurt or to be overstressed. So some of those exercises that I've already mentioned, things like squats, things like forward lunges, things like heel raises, a step or just from the flat surface. Things like kettlebell deadlifts, or just hex bar deadlifts. If you are in a gym environment, bridges, so down on your back, feet are flat, knees are bent, we're lifting your hips and dropping your hips. We can do that double leg, or we can make it twice as hard very easily by going to single leg. Walking lunges is one I think I've mentioned. It's probably enough to keep you going there. From a strength and endurance perspective, strength is being able to do something a couple of times with resistance on top of us, or we're holding resistance, or there's bands around our knees or our ankles. Whereas endurance is being able to do something a lot of times but not that much resistance around us. So you can mix and match, you can do the same movements but for two different outcomes. And again, I'm not asking you to come up with all these plans yourself. Please do seek out the assistance of a chartered physiotherapist to help you with programming some of these. If you are looking for a physio in your area, there is a great resource online, findaphysio.ie, or if you go on to the ISCP, so the Irish Society of Chartered Physios, you'll be able to find your local chartered physio there. That will be able to help you programming with all of these sorts of things. Okay, again, I'm just going to have a quick look here and see if anyone dropped. How to get my time down comes in from Trey Sheehan. A couple of factors probably play into that. And I suppose the first question I'd ask is kind of, is timing your main goal? Perhaps it is, maybe it isn't. For me, when I run, timing is never my goal. I do track it just to make sure that I'm not doing loads one week versus very little the next week, that I can see that I'm staying quite consistent. But for some people, timing isn't a factor, whereas for others it might be. And in terms of trying to get your timing down, pacing would be a huge factor there, I suppose. And I'm not going to pretend to be a running coach here. Performance, I suppose, is at one end of the spectrum when it comes to strength conditioning and I suppose performance, whereas my role as physio would definitely be kind of more towards the other end of that spectrum. So do get in touch with a strength and conditioning coach or a local running club that might be able to give you a little bit more specific guidance on that. But best of luck, and I'm sure the time that you're doing at the moment is brilliant. All you have to do is beat yourself. Any more questions there? Okay, we'll hop back here. I'm going to get rid of that on my screen. Okay, I have more questions here that we got in during the week. You're welcome, Trey. What should I eat or drink before and after I run? So again, as a physiotherapist, I'm probably not the best person to ask, but I have sat in on enough nutritional discussions to know what the basics are. So I suppose carb loading is probably a phrase that you might have heard being thrown around. So we need energy to be able to run, and it's important that we fuel our body for the activity or exercise that we're going to do. And getting carbohydrates, carbohydrates are the macronutrient that will supply the majority of that energy. So things like bread, rice, most food sources, but again, those kind of white starchy food products will be high in carbohydrates. And I suppose the body needs time to process that, so it's probably too late to be doing that in the hour or two before your run. So typically the day before the run, the T-1, as the sports dietitians would call it, the day before the activity is when you should aim to get a huge amount, or not a huge, but a considerable amount of carbohydrates into your diet. So you might even factor in possibly an extra meal on that particular day. So that gives your body the entire night, that night's sleep, in order to process that, to be able to use it the next day. And I suppose the one really beneficial part of that is that you won't have that really full tummy feeling the next morning. Just before you run, you're not going to have that bloated feeling. So then the day of the actual run itself, and again, this might change if your run is later in the evening. I do personally prefer a run later in the evening, so you might be able to get a bigger meal in earlier in the day, but about 2.5 hours before the meal, you're getting a small snack in, something with a bit of energy boost to it. And then of course hydration is important as well. Hydration is a fundamental in terms of that energy process, to get energy from the body and to be able to use that and actually generate force. So getting enough water in across the day before, the day of, and then afterwards, I suppose, again, is important that we replenish the carbohydrates that we're after using during our run, and also from an injury perspective, that we're getting protein into our diet. So when we overload our body, when we put some tiny amounts of damage into our muscle, which we want, it's, I suppose, one of the basic principles of exercise and physical activity, that we have protein in our diet that will supplement the protein synthesis process. So every time we challenge our body, we stress our body, we actually put tiny little tears into our muscles, into our tendons, and the body comes along and basically lays down new protein to fix those tiny tears so that our body can develop and adapt to that level of activity, so then we can go and actually do some more exercise and challenge ourselves even further. The body needs protein in order to carry out that process and to engage in that recovery process. So we can help the body by consuming protein after those types of activities. So protein can be found obviously in milk, cheese, like most dairy products, eggs, meat. Of course, we can supplement it too, and there's plenty of protein supplements on the market, but that would be the feature for after the activity or after the run. So just to summarise again, carb loading the day before, get a lot of carbs in for energy. The morning of, a light snack, maybe 2 hours before the race or before your run. A lot of water. Don't forget to go to the toilet before the race or before your run, and then afterwards we're replenishing those carbohydrates, and we're getting protein on board to help out with that recovery process from a muscular perspective. So again, drop your questions here if you have any, and I'll pop on to the next one we got during the week. This one comes in from Trina, and it's sciatica pain, help. Can I get a quick fix, and would running make it worse? So this is a little bit of a difficult question to answer here on social media, because we don't know the individual characteristics of Trina's case, and we also don't know maybe the individual characteristics of the outcomes that she's striving for, or the day job that she has. Maybe she's very active, maybe she is working in a desk-based job. Excuse me. So this is one of the pitfalls when we try to answer these kind of questions online. But there isn't really a quick fix for sciatica when it comes to any injury, any issue that we're kind of suffering from a physio's perspective or a musculoskeletal perspective. Quick fixes tend to mask symptoms, and it's important that we're aware of that, because yes, we can dull down maybe some of the pain that we're experiencing, or we can change things slightly in the short term. Our focus really should be on kind of fixing that problem from a more medium to long term, because we don't want to continue to exercise or to run if we have an injury or an issue that we might potentially make worse, because again we're extending the prognosis, we're kind of delaying the healing process from occurring. So sciatica is an irritation of the sciatic nerve. It emerges down in the pelvis and pops down the back of the leg. So it supplies the hamstring muscles, and it supplies the muscles of the lower leg. And when I say supplies, it basically is like the electrical wiring to those muscles. So it's the messages to tell the hamstrings to work go through the sciatic nerve. Equally, the sensation in those areas is supplied by the sciatic nerve as well. So that's where we can get the tingling, numbness kind of sensations as well, from irritation to the sciatic nerve. So ideally, we don't want to irritate a nerve that's already feeling a little bit irritated, and that would be suggestive by the term sciatica. So we wouldn't want to engage in activities that are making those symptoms worse. Now again, this is a case by case basis. Some people might get a a reduction in severity of symptoms if they are to engage in movement, whereas other people might actually see an increase in the severity of their symptoms. So again, I would suggest seeking out an assessment with your chartered physiotherapist to just kind of get into the nooks and crannies of your particular case. But I would be hesitant around quick fixes for a couple of different injuries, for most injuries unfortunately, but again, that's probably my physio hat coming in here, trying to get gold standard treatment across, because again, quick fixes tend to just kind of mask symptoms, but doesn't actually get rid of the issue itself, be it a movement kind of change that needs to occur, maybe it's some local tissue damage. Yes, it might just interrupt some of those kind of symptoms, but it probably and most likely definitely won't change what's actually there at the structural site. So it's important to be aware of that. So that's probably a very roundabout answer. We've another one in from Linda. What stretches should I do immediately after a run? If I'm short on time, which ones are the most important? And again, do pop your questions in, guys, if you have any specific that I can get to. So what stretches should you do after a run? Again, we're probably coming back to kind of the place of stretches within exercise kind of on the whole. It's a nice period of time immediately after your run to kind of allow the body to return to resting heart rate, and stretches are a kind of a good vehicle that kind of kills two birds with one stone. So in terms of what stretches to actually do, well, again, we are focusing on those muscles that we will be using throughout the gait cycle, throughout running. Again, it's our glutes, it's our quads, it's our hamstrings, it's our calves. We're looking for a more extended hold post running, because again, we're not trying to kind of prepare the body for exercise. We're in essence trying to relax the body back down to resting heart rate, bring it right back down from that stressful state. So typically I would recommend, a sustained hold of 30 seconds and 3 sets of those. And you want to basically just move the muscle into a range that feels like you're getting that stretching sensation. You're not pushing into pain, especially if you feel like you've picked up a niggle throughout the run itself. You don't want to stretch into pain. It's a very simple analogy that I tend to use. If we damage a muscle, like if we have muscle fibers that are knitting together and contracting and relaxing in a healthy muscle, if we've put a little bit of a tear into that and then we stretch from both ends, we're not really creating a nice environment for those muscle fibers to heal. So in that instance, we definitely wouldn't be suggesting stretching into a painful range. But to be honest, we wouldn't be suggesting stretching to that range anyway. In terms of the length of time, it's whatever you've got. The warm up is far more important than the cool down. If you have the time though, it is nice to kind of allow the body to come back down to resting heart rate before you, I suppose, drive home or walk home or hop into the car. The next morning I would definitely recommend some stretching as well. Yoga is a nice active recovery method that incorporates stretching within that. So that's another option. We have a question here from Ash. Building up to run the mini marathon, my first 10k, good stuff, but getting some niggly knee pain. Any advice for this? So I suppose again, it depends on your particular case and your kind of case study, I suppose, as to where you started, what you do day to day, and I suppose your end goal. And we know that from the question 10 kilometers. So I suppose the body needs to adapt, which is again why I mentioned kind of where we need to know where you're starting from. If you're starting from 0 kilometers, you've never ran before, your body hasn't adapted, or it hasn't developed in order to be able to do that level of activity. The same way that if I decided tomorrow I wanted to run a marathon, my body isn't capable of doing it tomorrow. I can try, I'll be very, very sore and very, very stiff. But I need to engage in a sustained running plan and a program that's been designed to create those adaptations and to stimulate the body to adapt in order to be able to withstand that level of stress on the body. So I hope that makes sense, first of all. And the things that need to adapt, the muscles in order to have the strength and endurance to be able to kind of create that force repetitively. We're also absorbing some force from striking the ground through those muscles as well. Tendons transfer the load from the muscles to the bones, and again, over 10 kilometers, that's a couple of thousand foot striking actions. So in order to be able to withstand that over time, our bone density as well is another thing that has to kind of adapt and change, and that we're able to strike the ground repetitively and not incur any kind of stress reaction to that. And all of those different things adapt and change over time. So our body, each of us has our own kind of threshold in terms of the stress that it can take before it starts to kind of flare up and kind of give you some alarm bells. When we notice those alarm bells, that's when we know our training is probably kind of hit it's kind of a safe peak. As I mentioned earlier on, when it comes to kind of micro damage, we want to put a little bit of micro damage into the body, because that stimulates the adaptations to occur in the tendons, in the muscles, in the bones. And that might come with some what we call DOM, so delayed onset muscle soreness, and that's where we're feeling a little bit achy and sore, especially if we're after increasing our training. Where that would, I suppose, or the level that we would get to when that would start to raise some kind of some flags, I suppose, is when that pain level starts to kind of eke above maybe 3 out of 10. If I always say, if 10 is call the ambulance, 3 out of 10 is probably okay, we should maybe look at this, we might have to change some things. And I don't want to kind of suggest, oh no, we have to completely, drop ship, we're going to have to not run for 2 weeks. In some instances, it's just modifying what we're doing. And when I say modifying, it's just allow some more recovery time for those adaptations to occur. So this typically would be after maybe an increase in training load. So maybe you're doing an extra run, maybe you've changed your running route and there's more downhill, or it's a different running surface. Maybe you're running faster or you're running for longer. All these different variables just mean that we're actually the stress on our body has changed somewhat, and we're getting a reaction to it. But sometimes that reaction will be that little bit more, and things will need to be modified. And again, that's where I would say please do reach out to a chartered physiotherapist in your area. If you check out the ISCP website, ISCP, the Irish Society of Chartered Physios, you'll be able to find someone in your locality to help out with that. They'll be able to assess your knee, because of course in some instances, so the injury kind of that or the adaptations that I've referred to will be classed as overload injury, whereas in some instances, of course, we do have acute injury, where maybe unfortunately we might, land awkwardly stepping down off a pavement, or we've had to dodge a dog when we're running along a path and we rolled an ankle, and that's where we might have maybe an injury to a structure within the joint, maybe some cartilage, maybe some ligaments, and that's when we definitely need to have the area assessed. And unfortunately that might mean a little bit more modification to a running plan. So again, a probably very roundabout way of saying I can't answer specifically here, but your local chartered physiotherapist will be able to help you out with some of those, and hopefully I've given you a bit of an insight into some different issues that may have arisen and the reasons for those. I think it's very important that we do understand why injuries occur, because first of all it helps us in preventing them from occurring again, and secondly I think it gives us a bit more buy-in or a little bit more motivation on the flip side when we're trying to kind of re-enter back into our physical activity or into our training, because we know exactly what we should be doing and why we should be doing it, which I think is very important. No problem, Ash. Another question here that came in during the week from Sarah is, I have an ankle injury and I can't walk or jog at the moment. Sorry to hear that. Can you give me any advice on how I can build up my exercise before race day? So I'm hoping at this point you've already had your ankle assessed by a chartered physiotherapist, and they'll hopefully be guiding you through some of this. If you haven't, that's definitely your first port of call. The management of injuries can be different depending on the structure that is giving you some trouble. Maybe it's the Achilles tendon, if it's the ankle, if it's the back of the ankle, potentially it's the ligaments in the ankle. Maybe it's a bony stress reaction kind of at the talus, which is one of the bones in the ankle. There's a variety of different structures that might be kind of giving you some trouble. So it's important to figure out which structure or which area might be contributing. May not fully be contributing. It might just be a kind of a large factor in that. But it's important to understand what that is, because that will guide the management of it. In some instances, we need to reduce our load. In some instances, we need to kind of get working on some strengthening and stability exercises. So it's kind of important to know which avenue to go down. But I suppose the basics of ankle injuries, we're starting with regaining full range of motion. So to be able to move our ankle fully, we have plantar flexion, which is pointing our toes away. We have dorsiflexion, which is pulling the ankle up towards you. And then we have eversion and inversion of the ankle. So that'll be our number one thing. Our second thing would then be being strong in those movements. In a non-weight bearing capacity, so maybe using things like bands. Then in a weight bearing capacity, this is where like the real meat and two veg of ankle rehab comes in. Being able to kind of use that ankle as a nice strong stable support at the bottom of our leg. Our calf muscle does produce an awful lot of force in propelling us forward, but a lot of our I suppose force comes from our glutes or quads, and our ankle just kind of needs to work with them in order to kind of be a nice stable base as we lift it and land and lift it and land. So do just remember that when we're lifting one leg off the floor, we're putting all our weight onto the other leg, and then we're swapping vice versa. So it's important that we're able to do that with a really strong, stable ankle. I know some physios might recommend the use of balance boards. I don't recommend the use of balance boards, because I think there's probably some more other beneficial things that we can be doing. We tend to run on pretty stable surfaces. It's us that tends to be the unstable kind of moving object. So getting used to kind of hopping and landing. So what we would call plyometrics. So plyometrics and stability training, which again, I don't want to try and prescribe that here through social media. Your local physio will be able to help you with that, but that would be double-legged jumps, progressing those to single-leg hops, doing those continuously, and being able to kind of manage our body weight over our ankle, and being able to kind of absorb the force that our foot would take as it strikes the ground in those instances, and being able to control our body weight on one leg as we do that continuously. So that they're kind of the more end stage rehab goals. We do have some adjuncts that we can use when it comes to ankle issues, especially if it is a ligament issue. We could look at things like taping and bracing. Taping, you will need someone to apply that. I do actually have my own personal social media, have a taping video, but I do obviously recommend that you have your ankle assessed before you try to do that. And then bracing, of course, is bracing and bandaging is quite handy in terms of popping that on and getting a bit more secure stability from a brace as you kind of reach the end of that return to activity phase. So again, another very roundabout way of answering that question. There was one question that came in, I think, just again about knee injuries. When it comes to the knees, there's a couple of different factors. You're welcome, Marilyn, thanks. There's a couple of different factors that can be at play when it comes to knee injuries. It could be muscular, so around the knee we obviously have the quadriceps at the front. We have the hamstrings at the back of the knee. We also have the calf muscle, so the start of the calf muscle actually starts above the knee at the back. So some of those muscles might be involved. We have some tendons that work around the knee. So we have the patellar tendon, and that's responsible for transmitting the load or the force created at the quadriceps muscle to the leg and to the knee in order to get that knee to move. So if we spike our training load, tendons don't tend to like that very much. So that's where we're kind of training consistently, and then we do loads one week and then it drops back down again because the body hasn't adapted to that level of load. So a tendon issue and quickly throwing out there a tendon that's irritated, doesn't like to be stretched. Some people do tend to get straight into the stretches, and that can really make the problem a bit worse. Other issues around the knee, it's a weight bearing joint, so we're looking at the meniscus, or we will be testing and assessing the meniscus of the knee, and we'd also be looking at the ligaments in the knee. So we have the ACL, the PCL, the LCL, the MCL, which I know are all those different letters thrown around, but these are the things that we might assess depending on kind of what someone might come in and tell us in terms of the history of their presenting complaint. So yeah, I suppose the information is power. Information is helpful in terms of speeding up processes, because we can kind of fine tune our management of those processes to, I suppose, allow healing to occur if an injury has occurred, and potentially, as I mentioned, so we have kind of non-contact acute injury or contact acute injury, which tends to be kind of landing awkwardly in an ankle, or I suppose in a GAA game you're getting collided and you're twisting your knee because your foot is planted, these kind of things. But we also have overload injury, which tends to be the more typical type of injury when it comes to training for running or a marathon, because it's you yourself, and that's kind of where modification of training is probably the preferred method, depending on the severity of the injury itself. So it doesn't mean that you'll have to completely down tools. In some instances, it might just mean some tweaking, which I know runners are never happy to hear. I've treated some Dublin Marathon athletes in the past, and they really don't like to be told that we're going to have to switch up the training. But unfortunately, we don't make the rules when it comes to healing times for the body. It's just about kind of respecting those and trying to kind of adapt and change, and then you're kind of moving into resilience when it comes to that. So yeah, there is people out there that can help you. You just kind of have to pick up the phone or pop online and try to find them. I don't think we have any more questions. There is a resource on the VHI Women's Mini Marathon webpage. It's how to prevent injuries, and that's a resource penned up by the ISCP, who are the Irish Society of Chartered Physios, if you want to have a quick look at that. And of course, as well, you can pop on to the ISCP website itself. If you Google Irish Physio, it'll pop up, and there's a feature there, find a physio, where you're able to find a chartered physio in your local area to help you along the way. And again, don't feel like coming into us is kind of a kind of a white flag that you need to stop running for a while. In a lot of instances, it's just modifying and changing to kind of keep you on track as best as we can. So don't be afraid to reach out. But I think that is all the questions. I won't hold you guys any longer. I'll save this live, and if you have any further questions, you can drop them below here in the comment section of this video, or you can give me a follow on my own personal page, and I'll try and help you out. Do follow the Irish Physio Instagram page. It's at Irish Physio, and they will give some helpful tips around injury prevention from a physio's perspective as well. As I said earlier, my name is Lauren Guilfoyle. I'm a physio here in Cork, and I would like to thanks to VHI Women's Mini Marathon and the Irish Physio for this opportunity. Have a great night.